Ciao, buongiorno, da bin ich wieder. Ich bin Nina und ich liebe Chianti Classico. Und mit meinem Podcast will ich dich mitnehmen in meine Chianti Classico Welt und dich teilhaben lassen an Gesprächen mit Winzern, an meinen Eindrücken hier im Chianti und dir so viel wie möglich über Chianti Classico erzählen. Wie gesagt, ich will dich teilhaben lassen an meinen Gesprächen mit Winzern, die ich hier regelmäßig führe, um einfach dabei zu sein, alles aus erster Hand zu erfahren, um quasi up-to-date zu sein oder über Jahrgänge zu sprechen, über die Produktion als solches, über das Wetter und alles zu erfahren, was die Menschen hier im Chianti Classico bewegt. Dieses Mal aber wollen wir feiern, und zwar gemeinsam im Weingut Casaloste hier in Panzano in Chianti. Denn Giovanni produziert gemeinsam mit seiner Frau Emilia seit 30 Jahren in Panzano seine Weine. Die jüngere Geschichte von Casaloste begann also vor 30 Jahren und diese Geschichte möchte ich euch heute erzählen. Aber das mache ich nicht alleine, sondern gemeinsam mit Giovanni, Emilia und deren Tochter Maria Giovanna. Maria Giovanna hat einige Zeit in London gelebt und ist seit kurzer Zeit wieder zurück am Familienweingut. Wir haben uns entschieden, das Gespräch in Englisch zu führen. Maria Giovanna spricht selbstredend ein fantastisches Englisch. Meins dagegen holpert ein wenig. Man möge mir verzeihen. Buongiorno, Maria Giovanna.
Buongiorno, Nina.
So happy having you here for another podcast show for Auf ein Glas Wein mit Nina in Chianti. And we are sitting here now in your house, in the living room, let me say, of the family, of the winery, Casaloste, because outside there is a thunderstorm coming or not coming. We do not know. So if you hear something, it could be the thunderstorm. And we would like to be in the garden, but weather makes it not possible. So, but before we start, following the title of my podcast, For a Glass of Wine with Nina in Chianti, we have a glass of wine by our side.
Of course, and very important.
Could you tell us what is in the glass?
So we are drinking our Gran Selezione 2018, and this is kind of like en premiere because we didn't release the Gran Selezione just yet.
Yes. So it's a
sneak peek.
Perfect.
Somehow. And we're gonna release it in the next month or so, but already showing a lot of potential and the expression of our interpretation of Sangiovese.
And what can you tell us about 2018? Because I remember the Chianti Classico collection. It was in one of the former podcasts. I will give the link in the show notes. You spoke about the 17 Gran Selezione, and you definitely found out this is your favorite wine. So what is now the difference to the 2018? Or is there a difference?
Yes, every vintage has its own characteristics. The 2017, we define it as a low burner, like a wine that needed a little bit of more time to show its expression and potential, while the 18 is already ready. And somehow it's just as soon as you open the bottle and you pour in your glass, it's just it's bringing you back to that vintage. A lot of fruit, a lot of tobacco, a very, very long and intense finish is definitely a wine to try and to try over and over again.
Okay, so good to hear. Let me say it that way. So, but now I'm really curious. I want to taste it.
Cheers.
Oh, very fruity, elegant, wow. And definitely, from my opinion, Casaloste style.
Yes.
You can feel where you are when you drink. We know now where we are. But at the same time, I think it's very typical for Casaloste, for the place where we are. So the place where we are is the word for me. Let me give a short overview of Casaloste of the Casaloste winery, to my listeners. You can find Casaloste in the eastern part of Panzano, going down the street from Panzano to Greve in Chianti on the right-hand side. And Casaloste is almost 19 hectares, of which about 10 hectares are vineyards and 2 hectares are olive groves. In these vineyards, you can find the grapes, Sangiovese, of course, Sangiovese, because we're in the Sangiovese land, and this is the reason why about 85% are Sangiovese at Casaloste. Then you can find the Merlot and a little bit of other native red grapes. From these grapes, you're doing here different wines, like the Chianti Classico, of course, what a question. Very good or very interesting, I think, is that it is produced every year now since 30 years, beginning with the vintage 1993. Then the Reserva, Chianti Classico Reserva. You're doing a Gran Selezione, which we have in the glass. The Don Vincenzo, a very, I would like to say, important wine for Casaloste, not because that, but it's from a single vineyard, and it's a 100% Sangiovese. And Inverses. And I will later on ask you for the story for Inverses, because it has really a very special story. And because you have the olive groves, you also have some olive oil extra virgine. For sure, extra virgine. When I think of Casaloste, the following 3 key facts come into my mind. It's Giovanni and Emilia, Naples, and organic and sustainable farming. And let's start with the story. All began with a love story. Oh, what it's like a fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale. It's true, but it began with a love story. Not here in Panzano, not here in Chianti or in Tuscany, in Napoli, from where your parents are originally, and you, Maria Giovanna, you have been born there. And your parents discovered Casaloste in 1992. So you have been 2 years old. What does this mean for your family, or why did your father wanted to buy a winery? Was just an idea?
Well, I think as much my dad had started his career as a consultant, he always had in the back of his mind the idea of building his own business. But he needed like a trip to Tuscany to actually fall in love with this area. He came here on a holiday with my mom. I was 2 years old, as you said, and he immediately felt that that was the place where he wanted to build his own business and somehow like create what he already had in his mind. So it was like a mix of variables, like a little bit of a project that was not yet formed in his mind, and then finding the right place at the right time.
So I would suggest we ask your father now, and you will be so kind and translate for us, because your father is really Neapolitano. He speaks just Italian, and I love it when he speaks. And so I decided also to have him with us. Ciao Giovanni, grazie. And Maria Giovanna, could you please translate for us?
Of course, and I think there is no better voice than his to tell how everything started. Papà, perché non ci racconti un po' qual è stato la prima sensazione di quando hai visto Casaloste e che cosa hai visto?
Prima di vedere Casaloste ho visto molte aziende, alcune anche molto interessanti, ma nessuna che mi ha dato la sensazione che quella fosse casa mia, come in realtà è successo quando ho visto Casaloste.
He was saying that he viewed many property at the time on sales, some of them really interesting, but none of them gave him the feeling of being at home as it happened when he arrived at Casaloste.
Quando sono entrato per la prima volta a Casaloste, ero io, mia moglie e mia figlia che aveva 2 anni. E quando ho visto scappare mia figlia in mezzo all'erba, che era alta più di lei, io ho avuto proprio la sensazione che quello fosse il mio posto.
When he saw Casaloste for the first time, he was with my mom, his wife, and myself. I was just 2 years old, and apparently, and I didn't know that, I started running in the fields where the grass was higher than I was, and he felt that I was feeling at home as well.
Ho vissuto per 2 anni da solo dentro questa casa quando sono arrivato, perché la casa aveva necessità di essere totalmente ristrutturata, e ho dormito dei sonni tranquilli perché questa casa mi dava un grandissimo senso di pace, anche standoci da solo in mezzo al nulla, perché quando sono arrivato qui intorno non c'era niente.
The house was completely abandoned, and for this reason, he lived here for a couple of years by himself. And even the house was like under construction, he always felt safe, and also like a sense of peace that in somehow just gave him the feeling that was the right place.
Girando per le stanze di Casaloste, io 30 anni fa l'ho immaginata esattamente come è in questo momento, cioè in un attimo io ho visto come sarebbe diventata la casa in cui avrei cresciuto i miei figli.
After 30 years, he is seeing exactly what he envisioned 30 years ago. So like walking in the rooms of what Casaloste was at the very beginning, he saw what he realized now.
Anche le vigne le ho immaginate come sono in questo momento, e avevo avuto la convincimento che il territorio, l'esposizione di questa terra fosse quella ideale per poter ottenere i prodotti che poi ho ottenuto.
Even the positioning of the vines are today what he thought when he initially just came here. He realized immediately how the sun exposure, how the soils were, would have just like being a great position, a great structures to produce his wines.
Quello che mi ha più colpito di tutti è che in tutti questi 30 anni che sono passati si sono esattamente avverate le cose che io ho immaginato quel giorno che sono entrato in questa casa, in questa azienda.
After 30 years, everything that he felt, that somehow envisioned and imagined, actually they happened. Maybe in a different way, but they all happened.
What a beautiful story. Che storia bellissima. Grazie, Giovanni.
Grazie di.
So your family did the first harvest in 1993, 30 years ago. But let's turn back to this point later on. Because I would like to explain what means the decision to buy Casaloste. It was a decision to move to Panzano, so to leave Napoli. But as I know, because I know you and your family a couple of years, but not in the heart, just with the body. Emilia, what is your feelings about being away from Napoli here in Panzano?
So actually, I have such a clear memory of what happened 30 years ago, because we were supposed just to have a holiday week, and then Giovanni was already aiming in exploring a little bit the area and having some more connections as well with this territory. So we immediately realized how beautiful it was, and so the idea of moving here was something he really was aiming 92. The first viewing of the house was in August 92. And there were he immediately loved the house, the position and the idea of becoming a winemaker, making his own wine. And 6 months later, in December 92, after talking with the former owner, we realized that it was possible to start this business.
Yeah.
And
so it was not he decided, but
it was basically his dream.
Yeah.
But I felt that it was so important for him that it became my dream as well.
Wow.
So it was just the connections, because I felt I knew that it was something very new for both of us, a sort of challenge, as he already had a background in agriculture, but making wine was a totally new approach for him. So that's why I felt that this was something he was aiming to, also in doing something for himself. Doing something from scratch. So the possibility to start this business was something really important for him.
You decided together to come here to Panzano with your little daughter, Maria Giovanna, 2 years old.
Yes.
What was your thoughts? Because you had to think about, you will go here to school, find her friends, change perhaps the originality.
Yeah, the possibility also, the change of life was really incredible, as we were living in the center of the city. So, a lot of facilities were just close by. So we could easily drive the car, but also take a taxi, take a bus. Here, the life was totally, totally different. But our idea was, of course, starting this new business, but also offering our children a nice place where they could grow. So we came here in August 92, where Maria Giovanna was just 2 years old. But I moved personally a little bit later, when my second son was born, Vincenzo, in 1994, because as the house was totally abandoned, it was not nice to move for a little girl in a place that was not at least safe and comfortable.
And then you have been un Baltano in Panzano.
Yes.
What does this mean?
It's actually a totally change of perspective.
Yeah.
But of course, I brought my culture, my background, and my idea of welcoming people. Okay. So Neapolitan people are very open. They love, they help, they are helpful. And this was something I think it was very important also for the connection with the local people.
Perfect. So, and as I feel now, you kept it and you transformed also to your children. So I think they are Panzanese and Neapolitan at the same time.
Of course. That's, of course, they were deep into the culture of Tuscany, of Panzano, but also Florence, because that they had to attend schools, especially high schools in Firenze. But definitely in the house, they could breathe the perception of being originally from Napoli. They were all my three children were born in Napoli. So I feel that for some reasons, actually, Maria Giovanna, because at that time we were not thinking of moving to Panzano, but Vincenzo, of course, because as well he was, I moved here when he was just born, and Federico for some personal organization, he had to, and my doctor was in Napoli as well. So all the three of them were raised with a Napolitan feeling.
And background.
The background, of course. That was very important. Also, we speak a lot with the children. We explain everything about us, what we were before moving to Panzano. And I feel that they immediately, they felt what was our background and culture. Part of the family is still in Napoli, so they still have connection with their native town.
Grazie Emilia per questo introduzione.
Grazie.
Thank you. And I could say you have been very successful with your children.
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of all of them. Very proud.
You can be. Grazie. You can see also that you're from Napoli, always Napoli by heart. On each label you have here in the winery, I explained the labels before. Very interesting for me is that you can see on every label, I hope I'm right, this little sign. What does it mean?
You are absolutely right. I think when my parents moved, they wanted to connect where our roots, where we were coming from, as well as like the tradition of this place. So we actually kept the name Casaloste, which was the original name of the house, as a way to celebrate the history of this house. But at the same time, we wanted to give a hint about where we're coming from. Reason why, as you said, in every single label, hidden in a corner, there is the Vulcan Vesuvio, which is the symbol of the city of Naples.
Vesuvio.
Exactly.
Perfect.
This is for us is the match between two different stories that 30 years ago became one.
Okay. So the Vesuvio can also be a picture, let me say, for your father exploring with ideas at that time.
Knowing how creative he is, maybe it's a new interpretation. Yes, thank you, Nina. I think I can definitely see that. But somehow, like, my parents grew up there, like all my family is there, my grandfather, my grandmother, my cousins. So the connection is very much alive.
Yes, we heard about it. Could you explain, because your labels are very, very special in my opinion, because as I know, and I would ask you to let us know again, or let me know for my listeners, these are 5 bottles now in front of us, and I would like to say 5 stories on each label. So what is about the story of, let's start with the Chianti Classico.
Yes. So the Chianti Classico has front and center the house. And as we heard from my parents, this is not just the winery, but it's our home. I grew up here. My brothers grew up here. So it's that fine line between business and family together. So our home is actually the heart of the winery in every single sense. Reason why it has become the symbol of the winery itself.
What a nice picture also, because you said the home of the heart of the winery, and I would also like to say that Chianti Classico is also the heart of your winery, because not only your winery, I would say like all the most wineries here, because the Chianti Classico is often called here Le Base, but I think it's not only the base, the basics, it is more, it is where the fundament, where's everything built on.
You have to think about Sangiovese, which is the main variety used for Chianti Classico, of course, which is this like autochthon, original, like variety that here found one of its best expression, different layers, different shades of a variety that can give so much in different moment in time and through different winemaking process. Yeah. And also, as you know, we are in Panzano, the heart of the Chianti Classico.
Yes.
And actually, like a little story about the name Casaloste. Casaloste means house of the enemy in Latin. And because here we are 32 kilometers from Siena and 32 from Florenz, exactly in the middle. So the legend says the soldiers were staying here looking the enemies from the other side. So back to the story about the Vulcan Vesuvio on the label and the name of the winery is two big traditions, two big stories that they come together.
Wow. I've never heard before this story. So it's always interesting doing a podcast to get some new things. Then we have the Reserva. The Reserva has a more dark label, but a very elegant label. And there's something elegant on it. What is it?
So So like we found back the house, which is like lined in gold. And somehow it's just like taking the line and the story that we already found in the Chianti Classico, bringing to a different approach, like a upper kind of like level approach in terms of aging most of the time, because here the aging is way longer than the one that we have for our Chianti Classico. But I think the line, the style of Casaloste, again, we are a family business. Every single label needs to represent who we are and our style. And I have to say that we do a lot of tasting before we release the wine, because we want to make sure that they're actually the best expression of who we are.
And what we forget before to say is that you have your Chianti Classico and the Reserva is a blend. It's done with Sangiovese and a little touch of Merlot, let me say in that way. Yeah. So the Don Vincenzo is 100% Sangiovese, I said before. And this is, I said before, it is a very special wine and it is a very special label. Yes. Because it's really a huge story, we would like to say.
Yes. While we have the Chianti Classico range on one side that we just discussed, we also have our Super Toscan. And that's, as you just said, are closer to the family stories. The Don Vincenzo, we started producing it in 1995, so almost immediately. And that was the idea to celebrate and honor my grandfather, Vincenzo, who was the one emotionally and financially supporting my dad in kicking off this amazing project.
So this was the father of your father?
Exactly. Okay. He was the one, and I have amazing memories of him sitting in front of the house sunbathing and enjoying the garden. And we're missing him so much, but having him on the label is a perfect celebration of what he did. The Don Vincenzo labels actually see my grandfather profile on one side, my father's signature in the middle, and my first brother profile on the other side.
Because it's also called Vincenzo.
Correct. So coming from the south, there is the tradition to give to the first son the same name of the father. So both of them are called Vincenzo. But I have to say that if you read the name, how it's written, you can see there is the capital E in the middle of the name Vincenzo. Because in the house, we were used to call my grandfather Enzo. And in the house, my brother has always been Vince. So even if they're sharing the same name, we wanted to give space to both personalities.
Wow, this is great. So your brother is Vince and
my grandfather was Enzo.
And together is Vincenzo.
Correct.
So, wow, the E is the link. Perfect. Wow.
Exactly.
Very nice story. I love it. And by the way, I would like to say this is a very fantastic wine, and I don't know if you had heard this story before. During a Vino al Vino here in Panzano, there was a special possibility to taste old vintages. And there was the 1999 Don Vincenzo, and your father was coming to this tasting. Your mother was there before, and he came to the tasting and poured into a little bit in his glass and was smelling on the glass, tasting. And I think he felt in a moment so he was alone in that moment, let me say. And he started to smile, and his eyes were smiling. I loved this moment because I was looking on him, and it was so beautiful to see, because then I definitely felt how proud he is about that wine, let me say, about not only that vintage, but he was like a little baby, and he got his favorite playing stuff, let me say. So very funny.
Is we have 10 hectares and we are working here every day. We follow every single step of the winemaking process. We do a lot of tasting. We check and we recheck. And, you're putting so much effort, even with the mostly actually with the Don Vincenzo, which has aging of a minimum of 5 years before it's released on the market. Is a 100% Sangiovese, a selection of a single vineyard. So as soon as you see, you imagine and envision that wine and how it will evolve, but you never know 100% how it's going to be. And when you retaste it and you can find all the hard work, everything you envision, everything you pictured, I think if that sense of pride and happiness and is just the realization that you work so hard for. So I could completely picture my dad and his eyes lighting up as soon as he tried the 99.
Of course, the 99 was a very perfect vintage as well. So also and the wine was very good. I remember as well very much. The last bottle we have in front of us is the Inversus, and it's a thumb print, let me say.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean, Inversus, the word Inversus, and what is the wine?
Well, I have two brothers. The youngest one named Federico. And he was born with a very rare syndrome called situs viscerum inversus. He is completely healthy, living his best life in Barcelona right now. But this means that all organs inside are reversed. Is super rare. We're talking about 0.01% of the world population.
Wow.
Yes. So he is exactly as we are, but mirrored. And, of course, when my parents discovered, they got a little bit scared because it's very rare. But thanks God, there were no health problems because the space that he has is exactly like we have. So everything functioned normally. But my father took inspiration to explore and experiment a reversed blend. So taking the Merlot, an international variety, and try to link it back to the territory of the Chianti Classico. So we started producing in 2003, and the first vintage was actually 50-50. But we didn't see that the right, combination.
Yeah.
So we tried different things until we ended up on 90% Merlot and 10% Sangiovese. And it's so interesting because you have the Merlot when you tasted it, you have the Merlot coming through first, and then towards the end, you have the Sangiovese kicking in.
Yeah.
And I really do feel that gives shoulders and a little structure to the Merlot. So you feel that it's coming from this amazing territory. And the idea of the inverses, which means reverse in Latin, linked on one side to the story of my brother. And you can also see there are a couple of letters written backwards in the name Inversus on the label. But nowadays is also reversed respect the Chianti Classico, which instead 90% Sangiovese and 10% Merlot. So in somehow it's like a circle that comes back.
As I told before, it's every single bottle has this his single story, let me say. So we heard now a lot about your family, Emilia, Giovanni, Federico, Vincenzo, but now we would like to know a little bit more about you personally, Maria Giovanna, because I mentioned before that you lived in London for a few years, which is why you speak that fantastic English, and that you have returned to the family winery, I think 1 year ago, let me say. Let's tell us your story. Tell us why you moved to London. What were you doing there and why you returned?
Well, my story, as you said, I recently moved back, so I'm actually the newbie of the family business. And I moved to London when I was 23, immediately after I finished my university. And in somehow, I think I wanted to experience a big city, challenge myself in an environment that I didn't know and it didn't know me, and finding a little bit my way. So I moved there, a city I always loved because I traveled to London many times before I actually decided to move there. And I studied and I started my career in a slightly different industry. But in somehow, when you grew up in a winery, wine is a little part of your blood and who you are. And London was great because you have a lot of like wine shops and wine bars. So you can try wines from different part of the world. So as much I was doing a slightly different job on one side, wine will always call me back. And it was always part of my life.
London is a really, I would like to say, a capital city for wine because a lot of trading works through London. Still, the London Wine Trade Fair is one of the biggest in the world, I think, and very important journalists are coming from London, living in London. So London is really a wine city. It's funny, but it's
exactly like the vibrancy of the city, just like is pushing you to try more, to see different things. And that was the things that attracted me back then. The idea of having like a lot of options and opportunities to explore. So I lived there for 8 years. As I said, I moved to London. I was 23 and I moved back when I was 31. So actually all my 20s, which is the time of your life where you have to explore and test and try different things. And London was exactly what I wanted and what I needed. And despite the fact that I moved back, London will always be my home. But after 8 years, I felt was the time to start a new chapter.
Okay.
And as wine was always part of my life, and every time I was coming back, I was always feeling closer and closer to this house, and seeing how I could be part of the future of Casaloste and continue the story and the project that my dad started. At a certain point, I found that home was calling me back.
Okay.
And I was happy to decide to actually coming back.
Have you been in the wine business during your stay in London?
In a different perspective, because I worked with wine. I was a consultant, a brand and marketing consultant.
Okay.
So I work with like wine projects, and every time food and beverage was part of my daily life, work wise, like hobbies wise. So it was always been part of my day.
Because the people thought, an Italian food and beverage.
Exactly. A little bit like that. And also because when you're passionate about something.
But I think that the Italian especially can represent food and beverage very well. So because it's, as you told us before, it's a part of your life, wine. And, so you turned back with 31. Oh, very, very nice story. So what makes Casaloste so extraordinary? For me, the thing is that your father, we had the story about him before, or from him before, was one of the organic pioneers here in Panzano. He was doing organic farming I don't know since when he started, in the early 90s, let me say, almost from the beginning. So it is very funny, that he had in his mind to do organic. Do you know why it was so important for him?
As we have seen, he envisioned a lot of what Casaloste is today, and he was coming a very in-depth studies about agriculture and winemaking, and mostly the impact of pesticide on soils and vines. So being organic was a must-have from day one. So we actually started with organic methods in 1993, since the very first vintage. And
when nobody was talking about organic, let me say, on the market.
Exactly. I think that he always tells me the story that when he was presenting the first vintages, he was so proud to be organic. That was the first things that he was saying. And people were like, oh, I'm not going to taste it, because organic back then was connected to bad quality.
Oh, mamma mia.
Which is so interesting how the perception has completely flipped in over 30 years.
Yeah.
So he had to present the wine, and then people were tasting it. And then after, he was saying, oh, I'm also organic.
So
and people
by the
were
way,
like,
we are organic.
Really?
Yeah.
So for him was like part of his philosophy, his approach, part of his vision, something he would have never compromised on. And I have to say, over the 30 years, being organic is not just a certification that we have, but part of everything that we do. For example, is connected to the sustainable approach that we have at the winery. So in 2010, we implemented photovoltaic panels, very hard word, which actually allow us to be self-sufficient during the summer. So with the very hot summers, we need to keep the temperature controlled in the cellars. And in this way, we are producing the energy that we actually need.
Yeah. So when the sun is, or when the weather is hot, you need more cooling. And so the sun delivers the energy to cool down the cellar. Let me say. So you are really sustainable, organic, great. And you also now it's, let me say, we have to change our life. Yeah. We are getting more and more sustainable. But what is really interesting for me, or very special, let me say, that your father started in 93 with organic farming and 2010 with the photovoltaic. So, wow.
And actually, in addition to that, since 2019, we are part of an experimental project where we have monitors in key areas of the winery that collects data about the weather. And that allow us to actually make a decision about what treatment we have to use in the vines. They're actually more efficient and effective for a better use of our resources.
So your wines are controlled.
Yes, I think as much as you can. Another thing that my dad usually say is, we are under the sky. You never know how it's going to be the weather.
Yeah.
So I think is to make sure that we can have access to as many data as possible to make the right calls for our winery.
Perfect. And I have seen that you have planted a new vineyard quite close to the tasting room.
Yes, over the 30 years, we managed to replant almost everything. And it's quite like a lovely concept that happens on the 30th anniversary of from the first harvest, because that means that the old roots that Casaloste has have been planted by my dad.
So Giovanni left his roots definitely here.
Yes.
In different ways, let me say, but
exactly.
So perfect. So we learned a lot about the place Casaloste, the first site, the grapes, the wines produced here in Casaloste, the family Dorsi from Napoli, about Napoli to be a Napolitano, about organic farming, organic wine, and sustainability. And these all are stories packed in 30 years story and history, I would like to say, because as we mentioned several times, 1993 was the first vintage. So this year, 2023, you will celebrate the 30th anniversary of harvesting of a Casaloste wine. So perhaps you can give us a little preview because I'm sure you're Napolitani, you're doing some celebration about this special story. What are you doing? What are you planning?
As always, we have a lot of ideas. But I think the main one is telling a little bit more about what happened in the last 30 years, like anecdotes and like surprises and things that in somehow give us the sense that was like a bigger plan, that was the place where we meant to be, and this is the business that we were meant to build. So we are sharing a lot of like not secrets, but anecdotes of what we experienced over the last 30 years. But at the same time, we're thinking about key tours that we're going to do at the winery, vertical tastings as well, to just like see how our philosophy has evolved over the 30 years, and how a 1993, for example, Chianti Classico will show like and compare and put together like we did at 2015, 16 and so on. So there are a lot of events that we are in the making. So I would say stay tuned.
Yeah, I would like to say keep me informed, because I'm really always curious to taste old vintages, because unfortunately so many people think, and often many journalists say, that Chianti Classico is not aging very well. This is not my opinion. Definitely, there are good producers. You can taste really good old vintages, because I think the Sangiovese has the potential to age because of acidity, of tannins. Of course, it changes the style, but it's another perspective. The Sangiovese lady, I always say it's a lady. The lady gives to us.
I think the Sangiovese is one of those varieties which has a lot to tell. Mm-hmm. Different layers, different shades, and is I think like trying a 1993 would be extremely, extremely interesting. I have to say that the style of Casaloste is usually waiting a little bit longer before we release our wines on the market. So like the Chianti Classico, for example, we wait between 2 years, 2 years and a half, up to 4 years and a half for the Gran Selezione. So they're longer than what the denominations usually just like required, because we know that the wine will show moving forward. You have to think wine is a living product, evolves as people. So we always provide and give something different depending on when you open your bottle.
So Maria Giovanna, I just can say grazie to you. Grazie for your time. Thank you for your time, and good luck for the future. Grazie. And let's celebrate Casaloste. Let's start celebrating now.
Of course. So always a good time for celebrations.
Always always a good possibility to open a Casaloste wine.
Yes, I agree. Cheers.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Grazie.
Casaloste war also vor mehr als 30 Jahren ein verwahrlostes und verfallenes Anwesen. Aber Giovanni hat sofort seine eigene Vision für dieses Stück Land und das Haus gefunden. Er hat gemeinsam mit seiner Frau Emilia Neapel verlassen und in Panzano in Chianti seinen Lebenstraum verwirklicht. Heute ist Casaloste zuallererst ein Stück Heimat für eine Familie geworden und darüber hinaus noch ein angesehenes und prämiertes Weingut aus dem Herzen des Chianti Classico. Und jetzt kann gefeiert werden. Und wenn du jetzt so richtig neugierig geworden bist auf die Weine von Casaloste, dann findest du diese natürlich auch in meinem Online-Shop. Den direkten Link dazu findest du in den Shownotes. Falls du noch Fragen haben solltest, die sich vielleicht in dieser Episode für dich ergeben haben oder überhaupt zum Thema Chianti Classico, dann kannst du mir gerne eine Nachricht dazu senden. Auch diesen Link findest du wie immer in den Shownotes. Und wenn dir diese Folge meines Podcasts gefallen hat, dann lass mich das durch eine gute Bewertung oder auch mit einem netten Kommentar wissen. Und wenn du keine weitere Folge von Auf ein Glas Wein mit Nina in Chianti verpassen möchtest, dann abonniere den Podcast am besten gleich dort, wo du deine Podcasts am liebsten hörst. Wie immer hoffe ich, dass ich dich auch heute mitnehmen konnte in meine Chianti Classico Welt, denn das ist meine Passion, mein Auftrag. So fühle ich es zumindest. Und ich sage Tschüss, bis zum nächsten Mal. Ich freue mich auf dich. Ciao, a presto.
Da war doch keinen ein, drum schenkt ihm Gläser